Okay, I think we're working here. Let's see if we can present. Awesome. Okay. So this is a little lecture about feudalism and why should we care about feudalism? It's going to connect to one of the big ideas that we've been talking about through the past several months. All right, here we go. Let's see. So feudalism, the definition of feudalism is a political and economic system based on reciprocal relationships. So I'm not going to stop so that you can write things down. If I get ahead of you, you just need to pause the video and write until you're caught up and then start it again. All right, so political means it has to do with the government, and economic means it has to do with money and goods and services and the way that people exchange those things. A reciprocal relationship is a give and take relationship. So, for example, if I invite some friends over for dinner, usually I expect them to reciprocate by inviting me then over to their house for dinner. So, reciprocate is I give you something, you give me something. It was started in England in the year 1066, which is almost 1,000 years ago, by a guy named William the Conqueror. He won the Battle of Hastings in England and became the King of England then, and he introduced this system of feudalism into England. And now, why are we interested in what happened in England in 1066? You know, the colonies didn't even start until the 1600s. But the reason we're interested, you could probably figure this out for yourself, but I'll let you know, is that we started from English colonies. And so the political and economic history of England is the life that the colonists were used to, the background that they came from and that they brought with them over to the colonies. So feudalism started in the year 1066, William the Conqueror. And here we go. I think it'll say he set up an advisory council. That's going to be important in the future to advise him on what to do with England, what kind of laws to make, how to handle the people, things like that. And he also introduced feudalism in England. So what is feudalism, you might ask? Well, I'm happy you said that. Let's look at it. Okay, so we have here our feudal pyramid of power, and it has different levels. The first thing that you need to know that's really important about feudalism, or even about the idea of a monarchy itself, is that in a monarchy, the king owns all the natural resources. So the king owns all the land, the king owns all the water, the king owns all the animals, the wild animals, deer, squirrels, anything you're going to hunt out in the woods. The king owns all that. The king owns the trees, the king owns the fields. So all the land, natural resources are owned by the king. So, but the king has this great big area to rule, and he can't be everywhere. So he divvies up his land into sections and gives pieces of land to his nobles. So he allows his nobles the use of the land, the use of the water, the use of the rivers, the use of the animals, all of that. And in return, the nobles are going to promise the king their loyalty. And they're also going to pay him taxes. So they're sort of paying for the use of the land. The king needs to benefit from the land. And they also promise to support him with military resources. If he needs to fight a war, they're going to send soldiers, they're going to send their knights, things like that. Okay, but even still then, these nobles, the land is still in too big of plots for them to handle all of it. So they divvy them up between their knights, and they let different knights have different areas of land. Of course, some areas of land are better than other areas of land. If you have fertile crop, fields. That's better than having a big old rocky hill. But he divvies them up, and in return, the knights are going to promise something to the nobles. They're going to promise their loyalty, and they're going to show their loyalty in the form of taxes and military support. All right. So we have two reciprocal relationships here. We have the king, and he's allowing the nobles to use his land, and they're returning to him taxes and military support. And then the nobles are subletting, you could sort of say. They're saying, okay, now knights, you can use this land, and in return, you're going to give us loyalty in the form of taxes and military service. And it just goes on up the line. Okay, so the knights, though, they're busy being knights. They don't have time to work the land. So they have peasants to do that. And so in order to have the peasants working, they promise the peasants protection. So if some other knight or some other king or some other noble comes in and tries to mess with them, they're going to protect the peasants. And in return, the peasants are going to give them their loyalty in the form of production. They have to work the land. They have to make, well, I think this lady's making beer here. We got a milkmaid. Looks like we're getting ready to cut some hay or straw. And so, again, there's a reciprocal relationship. Protection for loyalty in the form of production. Okay, so we've got all these. I give you this, you give me that. If you give me that, I give you this. That sounds like something to me that we've talked about. If I promise to give you $50 and you promise to give me your car, that's called a contract. And so what we're seeing here is feudalism is essentially a social contract. They're promises of government and then giving up some of their power to the government. The use of land and then paying back to the king taxes and military protection. Okay, so this is where the idea of a social contract was introduced into England. It wasn't called a social contract by any means. That didn't come until the 1600s where they called it that. But this is what they were getting, was a social contract. All right. One other thing that I want to point out here is that this advisory council that William the Conqueror set up also it eventually evolved into Parliament. So we're setting ourselves up here for self-government is what feudalism is all about, the idea of self-government, and that the power eventually is going to come from the people. In feudalism, it comes from the king, but eventually it's going to get down to where it comes to the people. Okay, so we're going to pause right there, and then the next video is going to be just a little bit more about the specifics of the nobles and the knights and just how some of their relationships were set up. All right, hope that helps.